So to be one of these lawyers, you really did have to be brave. If you were going into some black Southern community, trying to file a lawsuit for equal rights, you're risking your life. And it's obvious in a way that white Southerners would not welcome these NAACP lawyers, right? But who else often didn't welcome them?
Southerners.
Black Southerners, right. Black Southerners often saw these lawyers as troublemakers. Because, you know, when the crackdown from white people comes, where do the black locals think the lawyers are going? They're headed back to Harlem, right? And we're going to be left here to deal with the mess. So lawyers like Thurgood Marshall and Constance Baker Motley, part of their job in these Southern communities was convincing black Southerners, I won't run. I won't run. I'll be here with you, even if things go bad. And earning trust from black Southerners was often very hard. These NAACP lawyers picked up cases from black parents throughout the segregated South. What today we think of as Brown versus Board of Education was actually a collection of multiple lawsuits that were then folded together as one case, right? But it doesn't start out as one case. It starts out as multiple cases from across the South. And one of them came from Farmville, Virginia. In Farmville, Virginia, an incredible, brave, 16-year-old black woman named Barbara Johns convinced other black students in Farmville's black high school to strike. Wait, what does that mean? To not go to school anymore. Right. And again, this was organized by a 16-year-old who convinced other students to join her and go out on strike. And this is the sign that she put up on a tree to start it all. We want a new school. Strike. This is the mass meeting called after the student strike had begun. And the headline has it there, standing room only. It mobilized the whole community. It brought Thurgood Marshall to town. And they turned their strike into a lawsuit against the unequal public school system. So that case would become known as Davis versus County School Board of Prince Edward County. Whew, you don't need all that, all right? But that case, Barbara John's case, is one of these multiple cases that get folded together to become the Brown case. And the one that's at the top is Brown versus Board of Education. And that case was about a black family in Topeka, Kansas. Topeka, Kansas. Not a place that normally leaps to people's mind when they think segregated America. The Browns lived right down the road from the all-white elementary school. Did their daughter go to that school? No. Their daughter, Linda, had to walk across town through a railroad yard in order to get to the all-black school. And once she got there, what was it? That's right. It's completely unequal. Who was the lead attorney for the NAACP? Thurgood Marshall now. Right. And Thurgood Marshall had really assembled a dream team of civil rights lawyers from the 1950s. This was probably probably the greatest collection of like civil rights legal minds ever put together. They each handled a different part of the case in the arguments. And Thurgood Marshall coordinated between all of them. In his arguments to the court, Thurgood Marshall included the argument that segregation hurt the United States in its struggle against communism. What's he working in there? Right, because we want to make America strong enough to defeat our communist enemies. And he said segregation is a weakness for the United States because our enemies use it against us. Part of their argument to the court was built around Kenneth Clark's Dahl tests, which often people have learned about in a psychology class at some point. How many of you have heard about these? So how did it work?
I think they were asked which doll they looked more like, and even the black kids picked the white doll, right?
That's right. So they put a white doll and a black doll in front of kids, white kids and black kids, and they first asked them to pick the doll that looks most like them. And then they say to the kids, pick the nice doll, pick the mean doll, pick the smart doll, pick the stupid doll. And what do the kids, both black and white, associate with the white doll?
Good and smart.
Right. Good and smart. And they associate bad and dirty and dumb with the black doll. And so these tests that Kenneth Clark had done in the years before this became part of the Supreme Court's argument in the case. In their decision, the court said that segregation was damaging to black children. As the court explained it in their decision, this is quoting from the court's decision, to separate them from others of similar age and qualifications solely because of their race generates a feeling of inferiority as to their status in the community that may affect their hearts and minds in a way unlikely ever to be undone. The impact is greater when it has the sanction of the law. For the policy of separating the races is usually interpreted as denoting the inferiority of the Negro group. A sense of inferiority affects the motivation of a child to learn. Later, not right away, but later, there would be a wing of the Black freedom movement that would resist this logic fiercely. They would criticize the whole idea of the tests as flawed, because their argument was, what this whole thing is saying is that it's bad for black people to just be around other black people. And you can see, like if you look at it from a slightly different perspective, you can take that out of it, right? Even though, of course, that was never Kenneth Clark's point, right? The point was to show people that segregation had damaging mental effects on people. And of course, was that the point of segregation by the racists who designed it? That was exactly their intent, right? Was the intent to create a feeling of inferiority in the Negro group?
Yes.
You bet. That was absolutely the point. And all these tests were saying was that it was working. But you can see how to some black people, they want to admit that this was working on any black people. No. They want to say, we're proud. We love who we are. We don't believe this stuff. But that develops a few years later. It doesn't really happen right away. How many justices are on the Supreme Court? 9. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court was this fellow, Earl Warren. Right after the arguments from the lawyers, Earl Warren knew there were enough votes on the court to rule in favor of the Browns. which means ruling to do what? Well, to integrate public schools, right? But Warren did not want the decision to be 5-4 or 6-3. If the decision's 5-4 or 6-3, what is the losing side in that case think they can do a few years from now? Right, they can overturn it and get it ruled the other way. So Warren thought it was essential that the decision be 9-0, that it be a unanimous court decision. This is pretty inside politics here for this little bit, but the way that the Supreme Court operates is that members of the court write an opinion, and then they try to get other members of the court to say, yeah, I'll sign on to your opinion, because I agree with it. So if you want to get the ruling to be unanimous, what do you keep having to do with that opinion?
Fix it, edit it.
Exactly. You keep editing, you keep changing language, you keep rewording things to try to get everybody on board.
It's like Congress and laws.
Exactly. It's the same kind of dynamic at work. In the sense that Congress has to negotiate to make a law, right? And they've got to negotiate to make a unanimous ruling. That little tidbit becomes hugely important for the way this thing turns out. In 1954, the Supreme Court announced their decision in Brown versus Board of Education. The decision was 9-0, unanimous, like Warren had pushed so hard for. And if you read the quote up there on the slide, that sounds like powerful, easy to understand language. The court said, "We conclude that in the field of public education, the doctrine of separate but equal has no place. Separate educational facilities are inherently unequal." So what makes the schools unequal? That they're separate at all. So what if now a southern state said, oh, sorry, we'll put books in the library? That is not good enough. Separating the schools makes them unequal. So does this overturn all of Plessy versus Ferguson?
No, but in the education system it does.
Exactly. It's just limited to public education.
That's huge stuff.
Right, right. But it does not apply to all aspects of Southern life, just to public education. This cartoon here is from what newspaper? The Chicago Defender, right? And you can see the Supreme Court breaking the chains of segregated schools. And there's Thurgood Marshall and part of his legal team celebrating outside the Supreme Court. Thurgood Marshall was now an incredible hero in Black America. And not just in Black America, but to lots of white Americans who believed in equality and civil rights. Here he is on the cover of Time magazine with a deeply admiring piece about the guy now nicknamed Mr. Civil Rights.